You were quoted in this article because you represented a couple of people of Somali descent who were accused and charged with fraud. Your quote has gotten a lot of attention because you said no one was doing anything about the red flags, talking about state agencies, talking about the government. Talk to me what you meant by that.
Well, these are from what we know from people who have pled guilty and the evidence that we've seen, right? So I'm not even talking about people who are challenging their cases, but people who have admitted to the fraud, okay? So let's go back to like the federal food program. There were rosters of names filled out of people who were purportedly picking up meals, and some of the names were as fake as Joe Blow, for example. I'm not exaggerating, right? In addition to that, you'd have the same number of people allegedly coming in to pick up meals every single day that would be traveling from sometimes 40 miles outside of a school district to come get meals dispersed to them, which makes no sense, of course. And when those numbers stay the same every single day, 7 days a week, 2 meals a day, it doesn't account for anybody ever being sick, ever being on vacation, ever deciding to feed themselves with their own meals, like go get a pizza for their family for the night or whatever. So it was completely obvious to anybody who would have spent a half hour looking at some of these documents that it was fraudulent. And despite that, these applications for fees would keep getting put out and keep getting approved and paid for by these government agencies. And this is not just the federal food program or what some people call feeding our future, but also we're starting to see this in some of the autism cases,
That's
potentially in some of the housing
yeah,
stabilization
yeah.
cases. And there are more waves of other types of fraud that are coming, is what I'm hearing.
Well, in that part of it, Ryan, I think a lot of us could understand the Feeding Our Future scandal, that there was a bargain that was sort of made. The state was trying to get money out as soon as they could, as quickly as they could, in what was an unprecedented situation because of the pandemic. The
Mhm.
fact that you see this in the autism social service area, in the Medicare social service area. To me, it now is apparent, and maybe it's fair to say at the time it wasn't apparent that this was really a concentrated effort, especially of Minnesotans of Somali descent, of our Somali Minnesotans. And now I think it's very obvious when you look at, not saying that Somalis are the only people who are defrauding the government, but it certainly seemed to be focused in that community.
That seems to be the focus based just on the numbers. And, here's the thing. Of
It's
course,
just
there are,
numbers. It's not racism. It's just this is the reality of at least the people we know of so far.
yeah, to be fair, there are people of other descents that are charged in some of these alleged fraud cases, of course, but disproportionately, the number has been highly Somali, right? We do know that based on the allegation.
86 people charged, all but 8 are of Somali ancestry.
Sure. So, what you have is it's tough because on the one hand, there are Somalis that have come here to live out the American dream. I've met several good,
Tons, yes.
hardworking Somalis that are doing the right thing. And then, of course, you've got some other people who have taken advantage of a program in one of two ways. One way is just that was the intent from the beginning, setting up a company that had no prior operations, no infrastructure, and allegedly serving 5,000 meals the next day, which couldn't even happen, right? So that was intent to commit fraud from the beginning. But then there are others, to be fair, who got into these programs, I think with the right intentions, but got poor training from the government, little, if no training from the government, hadn't run businesses before, were in over their heads doing this, and all of a sudden didn't know how to oversee their employees who are recording the number of meals done or the amount of time or services billed. They don't know how to oversee this. Maybe they don't care to oversee it. I don't know. And then they're sending this into the government who isn't training them and who isn't checking on these numbers, but is rubber stamping things and shoving money at them. And it happens over and over and over. And the message becomes, this must be okay.
Yeah.
And that's been a big problem.
Ryan Pacyga is with us. He represented at least one person who was charged in the Feeding Our Future scandal. And, you know, you had said that your client was one who entered with, she had good motivations and good intentions at the beginning. What when you talk to your clients, when you talk to people who are caught up in this, were they surprised that the government, and by government I mean Minnesota, were they surprised that the money kept flowing, that nobody caught them, or did they think they were going to get away with it?
There's probably a mix depending on who you talk to and what their intentions were, right? I think it goes back to was the original intent that people were hearing that fraud was easy to commit in some of these programs and that the word spread in the community and they all went and did it. That's certainly going to be some people, whether they're my clients or others. And then there are other people who, again, probably didn't keep the best records, were in over their heads, money's getting paid, and they're thinking they've got permission from the state that these loose or careless records that normal businesses would look at as being poor record keeping somehow suffices and that that's okay. You know,
Yeah. That's the
it's a
part
big
that's
problem.
shocking to me, that you had indicated that there is like a tacit approval. And
Right.
if the government keeps funding it, you're like, well, this seems a little shady, but I don't know, it must be all right. That does show a bit of naivete of how the world works, or maybe like they wanted to convince themselves that it was tacitly approved. But the
Right.
reality is, I think a lot of us looking at this after the fact say, like, come on, man, like how did the government, did they miss the signs, or were they afraid to take action uh, for somewhat valid reasons? One of the accused ringleaders sued the state, saying that they were being racist in trying to stop the funds from going out.
How did that work out?
Yeah.
I mean, allegedly we're out billions of dollars, right?
Yeah, we should not, we can't be afraid of racism when it comes to taxpayer money being used in this.
No, I mean, again, these are, look, there's this utopian idea to have all these wonderful government programs, and in principle it sounds wonderful, but they all know that these programs are susceptible to fraud. Anytime you've got billing of government services in these programs, of course it's susceptible to fraud. And you have to have the right people in place that are willing to do the monitoring and willing to flag these things early on and be proactive about doing something about it. And on the one hand, I think I feel bad for some people who are trying to do it the right way and are wondering if they're ever going to get treated fairly in court right now, or if a jury is ever going to truly presume them innocent, because I think there are some cases where someone could be innocent of some of these allegations and they're just caught in a terrible time with this, and maybe lack of some oversight looks like fraud and it really wasn't that. That's like the nightmare scenario for a defense lawyer, right? Or someone accused of something who has a valid defense,
As a
but we
defense,
may not
sure.
have a public that has the appetite for a valid defense right now.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you've got the other situation where it's like, unfortunately, my view is that the state was falling over itself to continue to shove this money at people, whether you want to call it utopian ideas, virtue signaling, you know, putting the cart before the horse and getting the money out the door and then going, golly gee, what happened later? And just making excuses like, well, fraud happens, which was to me a very cavalier attitude for our state leaders to be taking here. I mean, who's going to pay the penalty? We've got taxpayers. They're going to come knocking for more money from all of us in these situations. And
Well,
I'll
and the
tell you,
other the other concern is that we have sort of a social contract where people are willing to pay taxes and willing to support social programs because we believe there's a greater good, and we believe they're being run in an efficient way. Even if there's some, like, yeah, it's the government, not everything's gonna be perfect, but like that there's some value in this. I worry that people are going to say, well, forget all of this stuff because we can't trust how any of this money is spent.
that's one worry that we all have, right? Is what happens to these people who were the victims of some of this as well, right? The people who really did need these services, and now the wells are dried up and they're not going to be able to get those services. And let's say since we're talking about Somalis a lot, let's say that you're a Somali citizen that came here for a better life and you're truly invested in living the American dream and becoming something here, right? And you've got to get on your feet. Sometimes that means small business funding or other programs with a genuine heart. How
Right.
much harder is it going to be for them
Oh,
now to try to go do the right thing and have these approvals happen. I
Well,
mean,
I'm on the board of Second Harvest Heartland, a food bank, and now we're answering questions all the time about fraud because just the whole idea of food and hunger relief is tainted because of all of this.
yeah.
It's wide-ranging impacts. Ryan Pacyga is with us. He's a defense attorney in town. I do want to get your reaction to Governor Walz on NBC. He was asked about the fraud and asked about the New York Times report.
Certainly, I take responsibility for putting people in jail. Governors don't get to just talk theoretically. We have to solve problems. And I will note, it's not just Somalis. Minnesota is a generous state. Minnesota is a prosperous state, a well-run state. We're AAA bond rated, but that attracts criminals.
So he wasn't willing to take responsibility for the fraud that occurred on his watch. Obviously it was the feds who did most of the prosecuting here, but state agencies were involved in identifying some of this finally. What's your reaction to that?
A miserable failure on the part of state government, unfortunately. And this isn't a personal attack on him. I've never met him, but he didn't put people in jail. The federal government had to step in because the state government wasn't doing its job. This could have been caught a lot earlier from some of these documents are just so blatantly fraudulent, and they were sitting there for a long time. And the comments that we had from some of our leaders earlier were just like fraud happens, right? It was almost sort of dismissive, and that's not the right way to handle it. The feds stepped in because the feds had to step in because nobody else was taking care of business. And now they've come real hard.
Yes.
I've never seen anything like it in 23 years of practicing law.
Ryan Pacyga, we appreciate your insight and the time. Thanks for being with us today.
Happy to be here.
So there you go. You can react as well. Ryan Pacyga joining us, sort of really a fascinating perspective, right, on this New York Times story, which is very much a summary of things that we've been talking about on the show. A lot of these stories have been broken by local news media.